Hello everyone, welcome back to Seltzertronics. I am the Seltzertron. RME, the German pro audio firm, has lent me two very interesting devices which will be the subject of this review, the ADI-2 DAC and the ADI-2 Pro FS. Now, as you can see, these two devices are very similar physically. They're both quite small as hi-fi DACs go these days. There are definitely some real titans out there. But despite their diminutive footprint, these things really pack a punch and are jam-packed with features. So these devices are essentially twins, sharing much of the same DNA, including the same AKM4490 DAC chips, DSP engines, and headphone output stages. Yet each has its own set of features that may make one or the other the right choice for you. But before we talk about the differences, let's talk about what they have in common. They both have a variety of digital inputs, including USB, coaxial SPDIF, and optical. They have balanced and unbalanced analog outputs, and an extremely powerful DSP engine, including a fully configurable 5-band parametric EQ, with the channels each able to be independently configured. Now, this is an often overlooked, underappreciated feature. Importantly, a parametric EQ will allow you to program in digital room correction that can result in an extremely huge boost in the sound quality of your speaker system, or even headphone systems if you have the right measurement equipment. They have a number of selectable filters, including sharp, short delay, sharp, slow, a non-oversampling filter, as well as a standard sharp and slow filter. I did do some blind testing with the short delay sharp and the non-oversampling mode, and I could tell a difference. It was slight and it was subtle, but in blind testing, I repeatedly preferred the short delay sharp filter. There are tons of other cool settings, so many settings that I dare say there would be too many to talk about in this video. What I can do instead of talking about every single feature is I can show you the manual tome. This is the manual and it is detailed. This is going to be your best friend. This is going to be your Bible if you end up with one of these devices, especially the Pro FS. But even this guy, which is supposed to be a more streamlined version and user-friendly, this is going to be your Bible. These are both going to have the same outstanding preamp capability with digital volume control. They will handle virtually any format, no matter what the resolution, including DSD, but no MQA. They both have very good single-ended headphone outputs with extremely low distortion and high output, up to 10 volts on the single-ended outputs. They have a sophisticated digital interface with highly accurate internal clocks, giving outstanding performance with virtually any digital source, no matter how bad, how nasty, how noisy is your digital source. They both have a well-engineered internal network of power switching regulators that allow the device to work with virtually any 9.5 to 15 volt power supply or even batteries. Further, RME advises that due to their superior power filtering and regulation, they perform optimally even with lower quality power supplies. No fancy linear power supplies needed here, folks. It includes a relatively inexpensive wall wart. They claim it to be a high quality wall wart. It's made in China, but it seems by all outward appearances to be perfectly high quality. Because I tend to be skeptical, I went ahead and I tried using my DCI Purifier 2 to place between the wall wart and the device, just thinking that maybe since the iPurifier 2 did improve the performance of my phono stage, I thought it might improve the performance of the DAC here. I could not detect any difference or any improvement in sound quality. So let's talk about the Pro FS, which is the more expensive of the two, retailing for up to $2,000, whereas the ADI-2 DAC is going for about $1,100. What do you get for an additional $900? Well, you get, and this is a big deal, analog inputs, including balanced XLR, and this is a combination jack for a quarter inch. So in addition to USB, optical, and coaxial, you also get AES through a breakout cable attaching to a 9-pin port in the back. It looks just like this. Plugs in here. Now, in addition to the full complement of digital inputs, you also get the same complement in digital outputs, meaning that the device will receive digital and output digital, allowing it to operate as a digital-to-digital converter. This might be useful if you, for example, have another DAC that you want to potentially improve the sound quality with by using the internal clock to reclock, kind of just like a maybe a Gustard reclocker or a Singser SU1 will allow you to operate in this very similar way as a reclocker. But you also get to take advantage of the built-in DSP engine. So you can receive a digital signal, process it, and then send it out to whatever else you want to send it to. Now, also note that while they both support optical via the SPDF standard format, the Pro FS will also support the ADAT format. So what better way to take full advantage of all of these analog and digital inputs than to incorporate an ADC, or an analog to digital converter? Now remember, while this device does operate as a preamp, it has no analog volume control capability. It's 100% digital. It will do 100% digital volume control on everything that comes in, which means it has to digitize all of those analog inputs so it can digitally control the volume. So whereas the DAC has only a single-ended headphone output, the Pro FS will do balanced out of its dual quarter-inch TRS outputs. This will significantly improve the already formidable signal-to-noise ratio and give you even more power, up to 20 volts. Now, by my calculation, 20 volts, and this is sort of a non-standard way of talking about headphone power output. Maybe more of us are used to talking about watts per channel. That comes up to about 6 watts per channel into 32 ohm in balanced mode, compared to roughly about 1.5 watts per channel into 32 ohms in single-ended mode. So it's quite a bit more powerful. Alternatively, you can use the dual quarter-inch to drive 2 pairs of single-ended headphones. They work completely independently of each other. This isn't a splitter. It's actually 2 headphone amplifiers with individually adjustable volume, ideal for level matching and A-Bing headphones. So let's talk about the ADI-2 DAC. Well, you only get a single-ended headphone output, but it does something else very unique, all of its own, that might make this substantially cheaper device the unquestionably right one for you. And that is this ultra low noise IEM output. If you have IEMs, if you listen to IEMs, and if you do, you know that they can sound absolutely fantastic, but can be a bit of a pain to drive because most amplifiers are just too powerful for them. And that noise becomes perceptible when you got that thing right into your ear and you really hear everything. The ultra low noise IEM output is absolutely incredible. I'm not traditionally an IEM guy, but these made me want to get some really nice IEMs. I'm hopefully going to be able to try some really nice ones soon, but right at the moment, the best ones that I could use are my Shure SE215s, which are not great. They're all right, but let me tell you, they sounded better than they have ever sounded with that IEM output. If you're an IEM person, I really can't think of why you would want anything else. unless you need something portable, not super portable. In addition to the IEM output, it has a streamlined interface. It's a bit simpler to use. The Pro FS, I'm not going to lie, it can be pretty challenging. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But to make things a little bit more accessible, I guess, to a larger audience, RME did simplify it somewhat. It's not dumbed down, don't worry. It's not easy mode. It's just maybe a bit more straightforward. Oh. It has a remote. Now this, I think for many of you, especially if you plan on using it as a digital preamp, you're going to want a remote. The Pro FS does not have a remote. I'm just going to say it right now. The biggest flaw with the Pro FS is that there is no remote. And the DAC does have a remote. If you need a remote, well, then there's your answer. I wish this thing had a remote so bad. Well, those are pretty much the differences between these two devices. This one has a special IEM output. This one has analog inputs and an ADC. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later too. But before, I want to talk about the sound as a DAC. And that's going to be identical on these two devices. It's the same circuitry, same chips. It's going to sound the same. I have tested this, and I assure you that it does. So as a DAC, to get a read on these devices, I did both sighted and blinded comparisons with just the DAC sections of the RMEs, the Schitt-Jotunheim Delta Sigma and the multibit, the Air Codecs, and the Schitt-Gungnir multibit. In sum, they're outstanding. Extremely clean, detailed, and accurate. No harshness. There are no flaws. In terms of sound signature, I want to say that these DACs are very linear, which can sometimes sound cool or clinical to people, as so many DACs are tuned for a bit of added warmth, coloration, smoothness in the highs, and so forth. For example, compared to the Gungnir multibit, or Schitt DACs generally, it lacks that big, extra wide, boosted soundstage, but makes up for it in raw accuracy. This here is pro gear. That means that it's supposed to show you what's there, not necessarily what makes for the most easygoing, enjoyable listening experience. It's about what's really there. These are some of the best imaging DACs I have ever tested, and accordingly are extremely good for you hardcore gamers. There are tons of tweaks, like adjustable filters and EQ, which give flexibility to fix stuff you don't like. For example, I just turn this little knob right here for a 3 decibel bass boost, my preference. It goes in 0.5 decibel increments up to 6, just on this little handy dandy convenient knob. You can do more if you go inside. On my Shure SRH 1540s, they're not the most bassy headphones. Sometimes I want to get that slam just a little bit. 3 decibels. It's very nicely done. Sounds great and very natural. Doesn't sound like cheesy bass boost at all. Just sounds like more bass. But why stop at bass boosts? I'll mention this probably a couple more times in this review, and I've already suggested at it previously, but both of these have a 5-band parametric equalizer. In other words, this DAC has an ace up its sleeve. Nothing else, none of these other DACs that I have tested can do. You can perform room correction, digital room correction. If you have a calibrated microphone with free software, you can measure your room and derive parameters to be input into the parametric EQ, and that will give you digital room correction. And as astute audiophiles will tell you, room correction often makes a considerably bigger difference than raw DAC amazingness, meaning, would I rather have an $1,100 DAC with digital room correction over a $2,500 DAC? Yeah, probably I would. Okay, so let's talk about performance as headphone amps. Now, like DAC evaluation, I compared just the amp section to my other test devices, including the Jotunheim, the iFi Micro IDSD Black Label, and the AudioGod HE9. In single-ended mode, both devices possess superior balance and detail, neither warm nor cool. The Jotunheim is, in my opinion, quite a good amp, warm and powerful, but with a twinge of harshness in the treble. There are no such issues here. It's a superior amp to the Jotunheim in every way, and it isn't even close. And these things still punch up. I had no trouble driving any of my headphones, including the 300 ohm impedance HD800S. Especially in balanced mode with the dual quarter-inch TRS, there is effectively limitless, clean, effortless power. I really loved EQing in a huge sweeping bass boost, and listening to these things bring the absolute head-shattering boom to my LCD3s, and even the HD800S, which is not known to be a particularly bassy headphone. The only real flaw I can find is that while the highs are very airy and detailed, the AudioGod HE9 just seems a bit smoother, more effortless, and cleaner than the RMEs. Well, let's keep in mind that the HE9 is a $2,500 headphone amp. It's just a headphone amp / preamp. This is also a DAC. In balanced mode, I still gotta give the advantage to the HE9, but the difference is not as big as I would like it to be given what I paid for that monster. So next up, let's talk about performance as a preamp. Now, these things have perhaps perfect volume control. In fact, they might have convinced me of the superiority of digital volume control over analog. The RMEs attenuate the signal mathematically in the digital domain rather than after the analog conversion. This technically decreases the signal-to-noise ratio, which is not good. You want a high signal-to-noise ratio. This is, well, it essentially reduces the effective bit depth. You know, we're always talking about 16-bit that or 24-bit that. This reduces that. However, doing volume attenuation in the analog domain avoids this and may, at least on paper, be better. But it also introduces a whole new stage of electronic doohickery, meaning performance is, as usual, going to depend heavily on the craftsmanship, design, and the quality of components of the attenuation mechanism. Plus, RME has some tricks up its sleeve for optimizing the performance of digital volume control, like automatically and simultaneously varying output gain and digital attenuation to find the maximal signal-to-noise ratio. And it works swimmingly. The RME demonstrates how important volume attenuation is when comparing it to a lesser headphone amp like a Jotunheim, or even a Mjolnir 2, which also has preamp capabilities. They'll sound flat, lacking dynamics. Imaging will be smeared somewhat, as that perfect image depends on perfect volume control across the L and R channels. Now, as a preamp, I really hate to say it, but its performance compares very favorably to my HE9, which is, in my opinion, an outstanding preamp. The HE9, which is currently my preamp and headphone amp, replaced my old Bryston BP17, which was already superb. The BP17 replaced a shit Freya, and that wasn't even close. The Bryston was much better than the shit Freya, and the HE9 was better than the Bryston. And the RME, they keep pace. They keep pace. Now, the RME, I will say, as a preamp, did seem to sound somehow cleaner and more pure. I'd say it sounded a bit cool to my ears, clinical even. Now, while I recognize it as perhaps being better in some sense, I have to say that I still prefer the HE9 in this role. For the first time, I did notice a smidge of extra warmth in the HE9, resulting in some richer, fuller lows, and for me, an overall better listening experience. Still though, let's put this in perspective. The HE9 is a 20 kilogram behemoth that is only a preamp and a head amp, with no DAC, and it costs more. And you know what? If you don't have another means for implementing DSP, I use convolution filters in Roon, the ability to do room correction with the 5-band equalizer built into the RME is going to blow out any differences between this and pretty much anything else. There's also something to be said about the analog input on the Pro FS. Analog purists may disregard the analog input and preamp capabilities of the Pro FS since the device is truly digital only. It will convert any analog input into digital internally, doing volume control and DSP on it digitally, mathematically, including digital room correction, then converting it back to analog. Now what that means is you can get digital room correction on your turntable or any other analog sources. That can be a pretty big deal. Yeah, I know what the analog purists are saying right now. I don't know why you're watching a video about DACs, you analog people, but it might make your turntable sound better. So let's talk about its performance as an analog to digital converter, or ADC, as this ties back into this whole conversation about whether or not this is going to be a good thing for your turntable or not. To test how good is the analog to digital converter, I redigitized the outputs from the Pro FS with my infinitely useful Zoom H6. I also digitized outputs from the ADI-2 DAC with the Pro FS, because remember, the Pro FS is the one with the ADC. All of my test recordings were done in 2496. I did blind testing in FUBAR 2000 with ABX Comparator, as well as in Roon. Note that it's possible for there to be some improvements by ripping in DSD format, which the Pro FS is able to do, or potentially by ripping to some absurd using some absurd sampling rate like 768 kilohertz. I was unable to determine whether or not that made a perceptible difference, but maybe there's something there. I'll say here that the ADC is perhaps the only aspect of the device that I might be a bit disappointed in. And I'm not by any means saying that it doesn't do a good job or that it's not a good ADC. I was just hoping that it would really blow my Zoom H6 out of the water, totally changing the ballgame for the digital rips of my analog collection. Sadly, no matter how hard I tried, I just couldn't seem to hear a difference in blind testing. Maybe that's because the Zoom H6 is, well, it is an immensely awesome device, but, well, I couldn't tell the difference. It does at least as good as the Zoom H6. As an extra test, I tried comparing the ADI-2 DAC with digital input, then running the analog output from the Pro FS into the ADI-2. This allowed me to A/B the direct DAC performance versus the performance with an additional ADC DAC cycle, or analog to digital, digital to analog cycle. In this case, I was able to reliably choose which device was which. This implies that the additional ADC DAC cycle does degrade sound quality, which is a significant drawback if you plan on ripping your vinyl or connecting an analog source, like a turntable. Again, I'm not saying it did a bad job. Rather, I was just hoping that it would be a smidge better in this regard. As well, there is something else that's very important to keep in mind. While the additional ADC DAC cycle does decrease sound quality, you also gain the ability to do DSP, meaning your turntable will enjoy the benefits of digital room correction, which, as I mentioned before, are potentially huge. So, here's my overall assessment. First, I'll tell you what I don't like about this product. I'm getting this out of the way because it isn't going to take very long. While I love the extensive options and feature set, actually navigating through the menus is borderline unlearnable. I mean, I've had these devices for 8 weeks. I could do everything I want to do, but it doesn't mean that it always goes smoothly. I spend, what I'll just say is, an embarrassing amount of time working through the menus trying to find what I'm looking for. I mean, it's all rational in a sense. It probably makes perfect sense if you have a German engineering degree, but it's like sometimes this button does one thing, but it will do a different thing depending on reasons. You get it. There's a flow to it. You will pick it up, but it's a doozy. That being said, whatever. Maybe if it were a bit easier, I'd spend more time fiddling with it, with all of its endless features than I do. But honestly, how often do you really have to mess with things? Most DACs don't even have these things to mess with in the first place. You mess with them for a little while, you get them the way you like them, and then you let it go. So I can suffer through some menu slogging on occasion. My only concern is that some users might not even be able to tolerate that. And the thing is, you can actually screw things up. So in sum, if you're the kind of person that really dislikes options and digital doohickery, either stick with the somewhat streamlined ADI-2 DAC or get something that is just digital in, analog out, like any shit DAC or the Air Codecs. Also a fantastic sounding DAC with a review coming up shortly. You plug it in, you plug it out. That's it. There's nothing else to do. While I'm at it, I also wish, did I mention this? Did I mention I wish the Pro has a remote? It doesn't have a remote. Its formidable preamp capabilities, described exhaustively above, are all kind of for naught if you don't have a remote. Note that the DAC does. Put it right there so we never forget that the DAC has a remote and the Pro FS does not. But then this doesn't have an analog input. How am I going to choose which one? Okay, so the bad is out of the way. This is one of the best products available. Full stop. Better only exists when you start getting into very expensive exotic stuff. Better DACs and headphone amps exist. But this right here, these two, especially this one, the DAC, is the elbow of the diminishing marginal utility curve. This is where value stops, beyond which you enter the realm of only extremely costly gains. For $1,100, I just don't believe you can do much better than the ADI-2 DAC. As an upgrade from something in the $400 to $700 range, which is where I imagine you might be coming from if you're looking at an $1,100 DAC, the difference is simply astonishing. Alternatively, looking the other way, if you're upgrading from the RME to something in the $2,000 plus range, I think you're probably going to be a bit disappointed. It might be a bit better than the RME, but not that much. In fact, I may very well end up buying one of these devices for myself. I think ultimately I want a bit more Summit Phi for my main system, but honestly, this thing is good enough to make some exotic super DAC a low priority. Rather, in the meantime, it makes much more sense for me to focus on other things like speakers and amplifiers, because this is that good. I am comfortable using this until I have the rest of the system upgraded, and then finally, to get that final tweak in performance, maybe I finally upgrade to that big fancy super DAC. And then for a secondary system or office use, I simply can't imagine ever needing or wanting anything better. As you might have seen in one of my previous videos, I brought this with me on a trip. I used it in a hotel. It's so small and light and packed well. It was awesome. I brought it with me into the office for about a week, and it was awesome. Awesome in the office. Awesome in the office. Good game, GG, end game, office stack, all the way. So in review, these are some great sounding DACs and great sounding headphone amps, especially the balanced output out of the Pro FS. This is hi-fi, people, not mid-fi. Their performance is superb for their respective price points. There might be better DACs out there, but improvements from here are going to cost some buku bucks. They have tons of very useful features, including but not limited to the digital to analog conversion in the Pro and the 5-band parametric EQ suitable for room correction in both. The Pro even enabling you to apply room correction to a turntable or other analog sources. Operating this device is audio on hard mode. I'll give you that. The DAC simplifies this somewhat, and I don't want to scare anyone away. The default settings are great, but I do warn people who are particularly digital or technophobic. Getting the most from this device will require care and persistence, and you may have to work through a bit of frustration. And if you don't feel that you're up to that, again, you can screw it up. This is not like you can't really screw up your computer anymore. You used to be able to screw those up. You can't screw them up really anymore. You can screw this up, and you don't want to do that. So you got to know what you're doing. And your Bible. That's your best friend. All right. Lastly, who do I think should buy this product? Somebody who doesn't have some other software or hardware means for implementing DSP. Again, as I mentioned previously, I use Roon for DSP. It has a built-in 20-band parametric EQ, as well as facility for convolution filters, which is what I use. Also, somebody who wants hi-fi level performance and doesn't want to completely break the bank. Hell, I think the ADI-2 DAC could be the core piece of an amazing, simple digital system. Get yourself an ADI-2 DAC as a DAC and preamp, plug in some digital source, whether it's a phone or a computer or a CD player or whatever. Get a great power amp and a pair of great speakers, boom, you're done. For $5,000, you can have an absolutely amazing system. For $10,000, digital only, wow. Excellent. Highly recommended. Core piece for a $10,000 system. What would I do? Well, I'd get one of these. I'd get like a Bryston 4B and then a couple of Maggies, 3.7s. That would be amazing. An amazing system that will blow people away for $10,000. Lastly, I think gamers should look at the ADI-2 DAC. I mean, gamers, serious gamers, might be spending $1,400 on a graphics card that is replaced every 3 years. Why not spend $1,100 on sound that you probably never have to replace? Up your game and get yourself one of these, and you can experience the level of 3D realism and detail and accuracy in the audio space as well as in the visual space. Well, I told you a lot about who should get the ADI-2 DAC. Now, who should get the ADI-2 Pro FS? I'm thinking maybe me. I should, because of the facility with dual headphones and the balanced headphone output, and as well as the analog inputs, because I do a fair amount of analog to digital conversion, especially when I'm testing equipment. It gets you more in this. This is a tool. This is an awesome value DAC and headphone amp for people that want to listen to headphones and, maybe want to improve the sound quality of their stereo. This is a tool. This is going to be more pro level. I'm probably never going to use all of these features, but I think I'd end up using quite a few of them, and I would probably benefit from this. All right, well, there you have it, the Brothers ADI-2 from RME. Let me know if you have any questions. Leave them down below in the comments. If you have any thoughts about these devices, please feel free to share them. Also, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you like my video, and stay tuned for more videos coming up. Take care.